Okay, everyone, I've got now my second interview that I'm doing. This is going way better than expected, so I'm very excited for this one. And we were chatting for a little bit before we started recording, and she's a really cool person. So I think everyone's gonna like this one. So I have here with me SD Sampley, who I'm just gonna call SD from now on. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Not too bad. I'm just dealing with the Vegas heat. So it's like
Same,
110 right
Alabama
now, I
heat.
think. Yeah. Oh, well, you have humidity, so it's way worse. So I don't envy that. But yeah, so SD is a fantasy author. Just like my last interview was a fantasy author. So I see a theme going here, and there's a lot for me to learn, honestly, from these because I don't really write fantasy, and I've read some fantasy, but it's not really my genre that I usually lean towards. So I'm learning a lot, and I think that a lot of you writers out there who maybe are just starting out with writing, who are leaning towards fantasy, could have a lot to learn from these indie authors that are on here. So I'm sure you're going to learn a lot from SD today. So as you said, you're in Alabama, and I have a big question about this actually, and I hope that I'm not like stereotyping or anything like that. But my general fiction book, my second book that I ever put out, Devils in Sunday Hats, takes place in Alabama, which I always worry is like a New
Oh.
Yorker's stereotype of what Alabama is like.
hmm
But my question for you is, because you're a fantasy author, and fantasy typically has a lot of magical systems in it. And I've seen, because I remember when Harry Potter came out, what the
hmm
evangelical community's reaction was, where it was like you're turning children to witchcraft and
Right.
all of this. So for you, living in a state and just generally a region of the country that tends to be a little bit more on the literalist side of like biblical interpretation and all of that. Um, did you ever have any kind of either personal hangups that maybe made you a little bit reluctant to write certain things just because you were surrounded by this, or did you ever have kind of like a weird reaction to what you write, since you do write sort of magical systems?
hmm Well, around here, I've been very lucky in that most of my family is not some of those people. So they've been very open and welcoming with my stuff. There have been a couple people that have been a little, I don't want to say weirded out, but just not with the vibe of vampires and werewolves and magic systems because really we really only have one quote magic like store around here, and it's been a lot of like subject of protest and angst in the community
Really?
because there's like a
Okay.
witchcraft store around here. And then for some of the books it's devil books. That
Mm,
was a big one, but luckily my stuff isn't that big yet to be that wide received to have that many people on my stuff necessarily. But what you said about the Harry Potter books, I have seen quite a bit of that. I actually know a few people whose parents refused to let them read that kind of stuff because it was, quote, devil books. And then that, any Pokemon stuff, just, it's definitely an experience trying to
I'm
market
sure.
a fantasy book out here for people who aren't necessarily into that,
Mhm.
especially religiously,
Yeah.
because my book does delve into multiple religions as well. So there's like an atheist, there is a Christian, and then there is someone who believes in every god
Mhm.
and just refuses to pick one to believe in. And
Mhm.
then we also have one who is he's Greek, so he believes back in the old Grecian gods.
Okay.
Uh, and so far, I haven't caught much flack for that,
That's
but
good.
I
I'm
do
glad.
expect to run into some in the future, and it's
Mhm.
just going to come with the territory.
Yeah.
But I mean,
I
people just
always
got.
think, like, honestly, if you get kind of a a negative reception for things like that. Not, I don't mean like, oh, you get reviews that say like, oh, your writing's really bad, but like
Mhm.
things that are a reaction to
Right.
controversial stuff in your writing. I always feel like that's a good thing. Like
Yeah,
I
any
like
publicity
the
is
idea of
good.
that, right? Like bad press is better than no press, right? So
Right.
it's like, I don't know. I just think it's if you get people to really start talking, even if the stuff that they're saying is ridiculous,
Right.
like it's you're generating a conversation and like really stirring
Right.
something up. So I feel like you've done something right if you do that. So
Yeah.
um so it'll be cool like when you know your books are like more well known in your own community or just like widespread in general and to see kind of what people's reaction
Yeah. How
is
it
like
goes. Yeah.
yeah, like, you know, from what I've seen on, you know, like we met on TikTok, a lot of, at least in the fantasy author community on TikTok, there's a lot of people who are certainly like religiously receptive to those kinds of
Mhm.
things. Um, I actually, uh, I don't want to make this about myself, but like I have kind of a complicated spiritual journey that I've been through over the course of my life. So, I've been in like neo-paganism, I've been in like witchcraft type things.
Mhm.
I'm not anymore, but I you know, I was raised Catholic like every Italian on the
Mhm.
planet. So I we all are, right? So it's you know, I've kind of come full circle and I'm back to Christianity, just not Catholicism. But
Mhm.
you know, I have an understanding of these systems and I do know like firsthand kind of how they work. So I didn't realize that so many people on TikTok, especially in like the fantasy author community,
Mhm.
were not just like interested in those kinds of things because magic is part of fantasy, but they actually live these things. Like this
Mhm.
is you know, obviously like magical systems in real life are not nearly as dramatic as like you know something in a fantasy book or a fantasy
Right.
movie or something, you know, like you're not going to see like fireballs shooting out of someone's hands,
Right.
but like you but you know having that sort of magical thinking, because I feel like I still do have that kind of mindset. I do have a
Mhm.
very kind of magical view of the world. um it's just it's interesting to see that that is so prevalent, especially on TikTok. I really don't interact with people too much on any other platform at this point. So so that's all I really know. But you definitely have a lot of people who will be receptive to what you were saying on at least online, you know,
Mhm.
like you're reaching far outside of Alabama at this point. So yeah, so I don't know. It's just very interesting to me. Like, I don't know if you would want to go into what your own personal kind of take on things is or beliefs. Like, I feel like I don't know if maybe it aligns a little bit with what you write or if what you write is sort of separate from what you personally believe.
I definitely put bits and pieces of myself in it. There's no one particular thing that's just like a complete train of just me. It's
Mhm,
just like bits here and a piece there, and you know, a little sprinkle over there. Um, it just helps because I have such a, like you said, a very different type of, because I grew up Baptist,
mhm.
and by the way, I'm Italian too.
Hey,
Um,
hey.
hey,
Hey,
um,
friend.
I grew
Fellow
up Baptist.
Paisan. I love it.
I
So,
I grew up Baptist, and we stopped going to church around like 10 years old, and I was still like in the religion, but I wasn't like really in it. Like I just kind of like put on a show. Like
mhm.
I mostly was fear based.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I got to do this or I'm going to go to hell. I've got to be good. I've got to do this. And that, as I got older, that kind of stuck with me a bit more. And I started in college, I started to think, um, I really don't want to be somewhere where it's nothing but fear.
Mhm.
And so I kind of I left the religion after college. So this is around 2020, 2021. I left the religion. And it's not that I don't believe in the gods. So I'm kind of like that one character where I said I believe they believe in all the gods. I
Mhm.
believe they exist. It's just I'm not sure if I want to pick one just yet because
Mhm.
there's so many different interpretations. in every religion. It's it's either the evangelicals, they're this way, and then the Baptists are
Mhm.
this way, and then Catholics are this way, and there's just no one set way that I would feel comfortable fully delving back into it. So I'm
Mhm.
just kind of on the outskirts right now of religion, just kind of watching. And I always get the well, you're gonna go to hell, yada yada yada. And I'm like, well, I don't really believe in that, and that's the whole reason I'm not there,
Mhm.
is because that kept getting pushed on me growing up. And it's not to say everyone does that, because I have a lot of good people in my life. Like my fiance, he is not one of those people. Like he's very um okay with it, and he's like, whatever works for you, let me be me and you be you. And there's other few people that are like that, but I usually try and keep that under wraps in the family, because
Yeah.
they are the pushers.
I understand that. Well, I think it's cool that you incorporate elements of any sort of like religious stuff into your writing, especially in fantasy. Like I think about like a Song of Ice and Fire. They have like the old gods and the new gods, and then they
Mm-hmm.
have like whatever the religion is of the Lord of Light, the kind of like
Yeah.
monotheistic one that shows up. They have those, so like it has those elements in it, but I like that you even have real world things in it,
Mm-hmm.
that you can kind of touch upon. So, while we're on the subject of your stories, do you want to tell me a little bit about it? So you've got 3 books
Yes,
out.
I do. I can
And let me
recommend.
say, I was looking at the publication years and I was like, oh, she's been productive. You
Yeah.
did I'm like, okay, so your first book, Moonlight Howls, was out
Mm-hmm.
in 2022.
Yes.
Hey, I love it. And then the second one, Blood Return, was in
Mm-hmm.
2023. And then your third one, Bright Moon, it was like 2 months ago, right? It
Yes.
was earlier this year. So
Yes.
um as someone who takes forever to write something, let me ask you, did you finish one and then start working on the next one and then publish that and then start working on the next one and publish that? Or had you kind of like were some of these done already and you just released them like in 3 consecutive years?
Mm-hmm.
Like how was that process for you?
This is great. You're gonna love this. So
Okay.
I actually
I'm excited.
I started Moonlight House, this book, in seventh grade. I started
Okay.
writing that in seventh grade, and I actually have the original copy that I wrote here. It's
Oh,
falling.
that's so cute. I love that.
So I started that in seventh grade, and then every year after that, I would just rewrite the first couple of chapters because I was a perfectionist, and I was
Mhm.
like, "This could be better." So for years upon years upon years, I just rewrote and rewrote and rewrote and rewrote and reworked it until about 2020, when one of my friends, I finally let somebody read it, and they convinced me to keep writing, and so I finished the book, and then it took me forever to work up the courage to actually publish it myself, because I tried to go through regular traditional publishing, and then that gave me too much anxiety. So I was like, never mind, I'm going to do it myself. And so the way that this had worked is I had this done for 2 years. And I had already gotten a couple chapters of the second one done, but I really didn't touch on that one until I published this one. And then after I published it, it went out of my mind and I started on the second one. And so I worked on this one. This one took me about 6 months to write. And
That's amazing. I'm so impressed.
well,
That's
it helps because I had already also, so Moonlight Howls was originally a 3 book series. It's a 4 book right now,
Mhm.
but it was originally a 3 book series. And so I had already written out in seventh grade the first, the second, and the last. And so I had a lot to go off of. Even though they're vastly different, it's still, for some reason, helped quite a lot to already have that in the book, in the bank. And I worked on this for 6 months and then I finished it. And as this one was going through beta reading and editing, I started working on the third one. And I published the second one while I was working on the third one. And it took me let's see. I started the third one in February. I finished it in August. So that's about 8 7 8 months. I'm bad at
Mhm.
short math.
So am
Um,
I.
so I finished this one in August and it went through beta reading and editing. And I actually did not start writing the last book that's going to come out until November. I took 2 month break because my brain was tired from writing all these
Fair.
consecutively.
Totally fair. Yeah.
So I took a 2 month break. I actually um, wrote some of it for NaNoWriMo. Do you know what that is?
I do. I do now,
Okay.
actually. Like, I have to say, as someone who, I put up this stuff about like, oh, here's my like writing advice and whatnot. Like,
Mm,
and it's supposed to be just like helping people who are starting out who don't really
right.
know a whole lot. I feel like I actually didn't know a whole lot about certain things. And like that is something that I only learned about in the past year. And I kept seeing that like that, contraction of it everywhere. And I was always like, what is that? So to people who don't know, like if you're just as ignorant as I was, no, no shame in that. But can you explain to people what that is, just in
Yeah,
case they don't know?
I actually found out about NaNoWriMo the first day that it started. So I was in the same boat. I had no idea what it was. NaNoWriMo stands for National Novel Writing Month. And
Hmm.
it's a website that you sign into and the goal is to write, I think, 80,000 words a month or quote a novel in a
Yeah.
month. And it's a huge writing community of other writers, all trying to get, and you don't have to hit the 80,000,
Hmm.
but you get like a certificate if you hit the 80,000 goal. I did not hit the 80,000 goal.
Yeah. Well, actually, let me ask you, speaking of like word count goals, because I was talking about this with someone recently, like in my personal life, like not online. I've seen this on Reddit a lot. Like I don't interact with people a lot on Reddit. I kind of just lurk on there, but in the writing subreddit, people ask this a lot about word count and what kind of classifies a novel or a novella or a short story. And they'll say like, okay, well, I found online, I Googled it, says like 80,000 is like kind of the cutoff for calling it a novel. And then for what you were just talking about, the goal is 80,000 words. So do you feel like, and it's fine if you do, it's fine if you don't, like no judgment or anything, but what in your opinion, like classifying books or written works in that way based on word count, do you feel like that is like a kind of like a valid thing? Like if someone writes a novel that like to me, like I think if someone writes something that is like basically book length, but they really have no reason for it to be any longer than it is. Like adding any more would just be kind of fluff. Then and it doesn't meet 80,000 words, like can they still call it a novel if the general convention is that it has to be at least 80,000 words? So would you say that that is like a strict thing to you, or do you feel like that's sort of like a general guideline? Like it tends to fall around this many
I think it's
words.
more of a general guideline. I mean, I'm in the same boat as you. Like if you've written like 30, 50,000 words, like that's a novel. Like that's a
Yeah.
book. The only way that I think I mean, like the novellas, the really short 20,000 words. That's, novella. So it is a novel, but smaller. But I
Mhm.
think if you put in the work, 30,000, 50, that's a lot. That's a lot of words. And I think chapter book, if it's chapter books, if it's not, if it's like an epic, um, that's a novel. I think it's more guidelines. And I've never really liked the whole strict because my books go way outside of the terms because
Mhm.
most fantasy books were, I think they said 80,000 to 120, and
Yeah.
mine are like 130 to 145.
Hmm.
And they're not epics, but they're still novels. They're still fantasy
Hmm.
books. Like so I would be a hypocrite if I said that those
Yeah.
strict guidelines meant anything.
Yeah, it just seems like something that people get really caught up on. Like there's a bunch of
They do.
things like that though, but like that's one that I keep seeing. And I just want to get like indie authors' opinions, like to say this out loud. So that way people who, are just starting out can understand that like you don't need to hold yourself to this very, very strict kind of categorization of your work in that way. It's just based purely on the number of words that are in it. And if
Right.
you don't need to write anymore, then you don't need to write anymore. If
Right.
anything,
Don't.
you're just wasting the reader's time adding stuff that doesn't need to be
Mhm.
there simply for the sake of making it meet some goal like that. So
And you're
good.
adding unnecessary
Yeah,
stress to yourself. Like there's no
absolutely.
need to
Yeah.
have that mental stress of trying to hit a certain word count just
Mhm.
so that somebody else thinks that it's acceptable.
Yeah. Well, that actually, now that leads me to another thing. People when they write, not everyone does this, but some people will set maybe like a certain amount of time that they're trying to write, like per day or per week or something like that. Other people will try to meet a certain word count goal. Like I personally just do time. Like I just feel like I can never really meet the goal in terms of
Mhm.
words that I set. So for you, like you wrote your books in like an impressively short amount of time compared to what I'm used to because I am slow as hell when it comes to this stuff. So like for you, do you set goals for yourself in that way? And if you do, is it like time, is it word count, or is it something else?
So that depends. Most of the time, we talked about this earlier. I have a pretty long commute to my job and
Hmm.
I'm in school full time. So right now, any time that I get to write is hitting the goal because I rarely have any time anymore. So if I have time in a day to write down one sentence, I've hit my goal. Now, when
Amen.
it comes to crunch time, like I'm about to hit crunch time because the last book needs to be done by August to get it out to beta readers to be able to publish at the beginning of the year.
Hmm.
I'm about to have to force myself to write in a time limit,
Yeah.
which isn't great, but uh I know what I want to do, so
Mhm.
it's just going to be the mental stress of trying
Absolutely.
to do it.
Well, I trust you'll be able to do it. Like, I'm super impressed by
Thank
everything
you.
that you've said so far. So, like, I have full faith in you. You'll be good.
Thank you.
I know what that's like trying to balance all of these other things like work and school. And like, I'm going to be starting nursing school in the fall. So,
Congrats.
thank you. So, I know that like right now, it's a lot for me to even make these videos. Like I feel like I cannot meet any writing goals that I had previously set. Like they've all fallen apart. Like
Right.
I can, if I manage to be able to write like great, I've been very slowly working on something new, but it's tough. Like
Mhm.
and I feel like self-publishing authors can relate to this. That where like there's some people who do it. Like for me, it's kind of more of a hobby. I don't personally think that this is something that like this isn't really what I want to do as a
Mhm.
profession so much, but I know a lot of people do want to do that. Like
Mhm.
I want to go into nursing and do I work in aesthetics and stuff. So
Mhm.
nothing noble about that. I'm not like, oh, I want to work in pediatric oncology. I'm like, I want to shoot Botox in people's faces. But like, I've been in that field for like 10 years. So I'm like, I'll just keep going with it. But like that's what I want to do. And then I know you're going to school for something,
Mhm.
but for self-publishing authors whose dream would be to like really live off of their writing in the way that maybe someone who's traditionally published, which misconception, not everyone who's traditionally published is actually able to live off of
Mhm.
that. I know plenty of people who are traditionally published who make nothing off of it. So I feel like people have in their heads that if you do that, that you're going to be able to be like rich and live off of it.
Yeah.
But self-publishing authors who do hope to maybe one day um live off of this. It's tough though, like to actually keep up with writing when you are working a full-time job and or
Mhm.
maybe you're going to school or you have like a really bad commute. Like it's not easy to find time. So I feel like there's a lot of people who might like shame online where it's like, oh, well, you're not writing consistently. Like, how
Oh
dare
yeah,
you?
you're
Like, you're not
off
real.
on
Like, you're not a
this.
real writer. Yeah. So like I'm glad that you're able to tell people that, try to make the time to write if you can, but like any sort of writing at all is an
Yes.
accomplishment. So
Yeah. Don't
yeah.
set goals that are unachievable. Like I
Mhm.
learned this because I have horses. I mean, it's all over my social media that I have horses. But I learned this in the horse community trying to do stuff with them is if you set a goal that is like top tier, like you're not going to meet it and you're going to let yourself down. You're going to make yourself feel worse. And then you're not going to want to try next time because you're going to be like, what's the point? If you set small goals incrementally, you can hit those. You can continue to hit those. And that's just going to give you the motivation to keep going. Other than trying to be like, I'm going to finish this book in 1 week, and then you don't, and then you feel like crap. But if you say, as long as I write at some point this week, that's my goal, and then you hit it, and then you feel good, and then you keep going. There's no
It like
point
reinforces it. And I
Right.
feel like when people set lofty goals that are just unrealistic, whether it's like I'm gonna write like 5,000 words a day or something like crazy, and just like, or I'm gonna spend like 3 hours writing a day when you really don't have that much free time, like it just ends up like demoralizing you more when you can't meet those goals, and then you
Mhm.
just feel like, oh, I'm a failure or something
Right.
like that. So I agree wholeheartedly with everything you're saying. So well, I want to circle back to your books
Okay.
now, because we talked a little bit about like the certain fantasy elements that you've incorporated, or at least like
Mhm.
incorporating religion into it. Tell me now, this is your chance to plug the crap out of your books. Tell me what they're about. Give me
Okay.
like a little hook for the people who are watching.
Okay, cool. I suck at this, but here we go.
So do
So
I. Don't worry about it. I'm not judging at all.
the first book, Moonlight Howls, follows the oldest living being on the planet. Her name is Talon Zamfira, and she is doing a mission for the supernatural queen of their country. And on this mission, she discovers that an old cult is trying to resurrect their leader, who is hell bent on wiping out all the vampires and anyone associated with them.
Oh, I like that. Keep
And
going.
so,
I'm into this, so keep going.
so she has to team up with her two friends to go and stop this from happening. And she runs into this mysterious nomad named Jesse, whose sister was kidnapped by the cult for an unknown reason. So they end up all working together to try and stop them from bringing this guy back and killing everybody. And it's a mystery in the fact of who he is. And I also left the big antagonist, the cult leader. He's been a mystery for the whole book. Um, and it's a lot of action. I wrote these books because I was the type of reader who was tired of reading these books about thousands of year old people who just, punch each other in the face and then say gosh and darn, like I
Mhm.
really wanted like a more adult leveled book where
Mhm.
there's, violence and they cuss and, they're not afraid to touch on the bad subjects. They don't shy away from anything except for spicy scenes because my grandfather reads these.
Oh my God, isn't
I'm
that
not comfortable
uncomfortable?
writing
Yeah,
that
oh
yet.
my God, I know. Oh God, like I can relate to that. I don't even know why I bothered to include any spicy scenes in mine, because second I found out my 93-year-old grandmother was reading it, I wanted to die. It was terrible. So,
Yeah, I'm a fade to black girly.
mhm.
I'm not
Good
there yet.
call.
And like also a lot of fantasy books have spicy scenes, and I like to read it sometimes, but I
Mhm.
don't like to write it, and sometimes the story doesn't need it.
No,
And this
no,
story
it's
does
not
not
always
need it.
necessary.
This story doesn't need it, and I wasn't going to try and force it into it.
Good.
So that was the first book. The second book follows Jesse's sister, and I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay.
There's some spoilers, but
Yeah.
it follows her. She's lost her memory, so she's trying to regain those, and she meets a bunch of people to try and help her regain her memories and figure out why the cult kidnapped her.
Mhm.
So that's
That's
that one.
cool. I like
Yes.
that.
And then the third one we actually is multi point of view. So you get one point of view from a character from the first book, and then you get a point of view from a character from the second book. And
Mhm.
it continues the story with both of those character points of views and them trying to continue to stop them from being killed. So the overarching theme of the entire series is trying to stop this guy from killing everybody. It wasn't
Okay.
death.
Mhm.
So
That's cool. I hope that everyone checks these out. I'm obviously going to put the links to everything in the video description. So please, everyone watching, go look at SD's work. I read a little bit about it before this interview, and then hearing her talk about it, I'm talking about you like you're not here. Like,
And I can hide.
hearing you talk about it has just made it a lot, like, even more appealing to me. So, and this, I'm saying this as someone who's not really a fantasy person. So I like that you're, like what you just said, that so many fantasy novels, and this is how I tend to perceive them, which I guess is maybe part of the reason why I tend to not gravitate towards them, is that they do seem very removed in a way,
Mhm.
like chronologically from something that we would be able to relate to. So,
Mhm.
you know, it'll be like, okay, it's thousands of years ago. It's people speaking very formally. Like it's people who, if they curse, it's usually from a very short set list of ones that they'll
Mhm.
use. Game of Thrones loves certain words quite a bit,
Yep.
and that are used a lot. And you know, it's just it's not always too relatable. And I like that you're saying you wanted it to be kind of more adult, like maybe like a little bit more gritty in a way,
Mhm.
that people, like modern people, can really relate to this. So that sets yours apart in a big way from some of the other fantasy novels that I think people might be more familiar with.
Mhm.
Is there anything else about yours that maybe is like a little bit different than the norm? Like did you avoid certain tropes that are common, or like is your magical system different in a way? And I mean, if it's not, that's totally fine. I'm just curious because I feel like you probably did do some other things that set it apart.
You know me already. So,
I do know you already. It's like I've known you for
um,
years.
yeah, so this actually does take place in modern day. So, I actually, most of the tropes that are in here, I have reworked. So, there's the fated mates trope, but it is not at all like the normal fated mates trope would be. Like,
Mhm.
I've twisted it into something, almost vulgar. Like, it's just wrong. Um, and then, the enemies to lovers, like, it's not like they're trying to kill each other all the time, enemies to lovers. It's, hey, you're trying to hurt my family, I'm trying to hurt your family, we don't like each other. So it's like a softer enemies to lovers, because most people
Mhm.
want that hard cut off, like, I'm going to kill you, and that's it. This one takes it more of a family aspect,
Okay.
and the entire system's different. So the vampires are different. They're different than any other vampires ever that
Mhm.
I've seen in books and media. I made them very different. How they're made is very different. How they came about into existence is very different. The werewolves are the same. There's two breeds of werewolves, and
Mhm.
they're very different, and they came about very differently. And then the magic system, there's two types of magic systems. So there's fairy magic, and then there's human magic. And the human
Okay.
magic came from fairy magic, so it's similar, but it's
Mhm.
not the same, and it has to be worked differently, and it's not as powerful.
Mhm.
And so I really wanted to make something that had never been done before, and it that was, first of all, very hard, because fantasy is such a broad world, and a lot of people have done vampires and a lot of people have done werewolves. It's a very popular genre, especially after Twilight came out, and that's another thing, trying to dissuade people. They hear that my book is vampires and werewolves and immediately jump to Twilight. And now Twilight, not to knock it, it did wonders for the fantasy community. Like, it jumped the fantasy community into, like, public eye with,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
it helped pave the way for other fantasies, like, to come to life.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to knock it. I personally, Twilight, I read it. It's a guilty pleasure of mine. Um, but it was very hard to come up with something that was unique,
Mhm.
and I worked very hard on it, and I think this is probably the best way that could have gone about to be done in
Cool.
this.
I can relate as a sci-fi author.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no matter what you do when you're writing sci-fi, you will almost always end up writing some element of Dune or Star Wars. Like, you can't avoid it because they were
Mm-hmm.
just so comprehensive about everything that, like, it's very, very hard to avoid having in some way you will resemble it, and
Mhm.
not just because it's the same genre, but like there will be something in it that
Right.
has been done already, and like there's nothing wrong with having that, but like you definitely, as an indie author who's trying to get recognized, you're
Mhm.
gonna want to try to set yourself apart in some way, and it's not going to be like, oh look, it's just like another person writing a book that I've seen 1,000 times before.
Right.
So it's not always easy. So like I really commend you for being able to find ways to set your books aside, apart from what's been done before, because it's
Yeah.
really not that simple. Like even when you think you've got an original idea, you end up finding out, oh God, like this is actually
Somebody else
has
has
been
done it.
done. Yeah, yeah. So
I've
it's
never
not
had
it's
an
not
original thought
easy.
in my life.
Yes, like it's tough sometimes. So that's like that's really cool. And I think that, all of you who've now heard this, like especially you fantasy readers, like please check that out, because this is like, it sounds like something that you haven't seen before. And that is, pardon the pun, it's a novel thing. So that's
Thanks.
but look at that. But yeah, no, like that's really cool. So I did see when you sent me your links that you also wrote some short stories
Hmm.
it was like a Discord group, right?
Hmm.
Like an anthology group. So I think it was the Inkwell Writing Collective.
Just
Is that what it was
mhm.
called? Okay.
Correct.
Um I've never thought about doing that. I didn't even know that existed. So that's cool to me. So can you
Mhm.
tell me a little bit about like kind of your experience with writing as part of a group? Like were you all working on those stories together, or it was like you
Mhm.
each wrote a story and then put them together in a collection, but they were separate, but maybe thematically kind of linked?
Yeah, so the Inkwell Collective, I just stumbled upon that Discord group um, in a Facebook group that I was in. Somebody posted about it,
Hmm.
and so what they do is every month um, they will post a theme. So it's just like a phrase. Like one of them was, we didn't pick this one, but it was like, oh, you make a wish on a star, not knowing it would come true.
Hmm.
And so you just get like a very vague idea that you can expand upon. And you have a limit of like 2,500 words. And you can post in there for help. Like a lot of people do. They'll post their work in there and be like, oh, I need some help fleshing this out, or I can't figure out a way to do this aspect. And the whole community will come together and help on that. And then we'll have it edited by the top person in that group. So
Okay.
he'll edit it. He'll make editing suggestions. We don't have to accept them.
Hmm.
He makes that very clear. And then we'll go through if we want to accept any of his stuff, or switch anything up, anything like that. And then it'll go through the last round of eyeballs of the person above him, and she will look at it, and then they'll just be like, yeah, it's good, nothing needs to be changed. And the there's a cutoff. I think the 25th of every month is the cutoff for you to have your story in, and put it out at the beginning of the next month
Hmm.
for the last respective month. And it's anybody you can submit. It doesn't have to be, it can be anybody. You just send it out there. It's great.
That's really cool. So you're writing short stories for that,
Mm-hmm.
and then you've obviously written 3 full-length novels. And what I was talking to the previous person I was interviewing about this, because he had
Mm-hmm.
written a novella and then he had also written a novel. And I was
Mm-hmm.
asking him like, what in your experience, like which one did you find personally easier? Like I know that people are going to think like, okay, well, short story is obviously going to be easier in that it's shorter, so it's not going to take as much time. But then
Mm-hmm.
someone like me, like it is hard for me to condense things in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So like um I've written some stories that I usually just call short stories, but like if we're gonna go by those like word count categories, they're technically like novelettes or something like that.
Right.
So like whatever. But I actually found that harder for me than writing
Mm-hmm.
a full length novel, just because I felt like I had a lot more space to go into what I wanted to go into. But when you're
Mm-hmm.
writing something short, like you have to make sure you're good at picking out the things that
Mm-hmm.
are important. And so like for you, like did you think that like what's your take on that? Like how was it for you?
Well, some of the short stories were a little harder than others to come up with something. Um, like it sometimes it takes me a lot longer to come up with an idea, but when I come up with an idea, I can usually kind of bump it out within the week because it's such a
Mhm.
short
Yeah.
thing. Um, and I mean, the novels for me, because I had already written them when I was little and I already
Yeah.
knew where I was gonna
Mhm.
go with it. I just I wouldn't say it's harder or easier. I just have more fun writing novels
I guess
because you
yeah,
can
that's a
flesh it out.
better way of putting it. I probably should have worded it that way. That's more what I yeah, okay. I can relate to that. So I found that editing down a shorter one was I just felt like I did it. I edited it like 1,000 times because I just and I
Uh-huh.
still like I'll be fully transparent about this. Like with my ones that are out, like I'm not super thrilled with all of them. Like some of
Yeah.
them I think are pretty solid, and then other ones I'm like, I probably could have done that better. But like that's
Right.
also because I'm older and have like grown a little bit in terms of
Mm-hmm.
writing. I also had written some of them with my co-author, my best friend, who
Mm-hmm.
I love him, but like that, it's not always easy to write with another
Mm-hmm.
person when you're trying to make creative concessions to them and
Right.
not monopolize the whole thing, even when you think like, oh, this probably isn't the best idea, but
Right.
you want to be fair. So it's so like that's I have like kind of a tough relationship with the short things that I have written, but some of them I do really like.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really cool that you were part of like an anthology group.
Kindle Vella thing too that came out
Mhm.
yesterday.
Oh, okay. Let's can we talk about that really briefly and then we can
Yeah.
end it. So Kindle Vella is kind of cool to me. I don't think I'm cut out for something like that because I was just talking about how hard it is for me to write short stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
my friend is getting into it, who I used to work with back in DC, and she's done like actually like fairly well with it. Like, how
Mm-hmm.
do you like do you like Kindle Vella a lot, or are you kind of just like experimenting it with it right now? Or
I'm
like
definitely experimenting right now because I had seen it for a while, but I never really quite understood it until recently. And now that I've started doing short stories and stuff, I feel a bit more confident in the
mhm,
fact that I could do something like that. But I definitely with this one am pre-writing everything to then put out because trying to force myself to do that week is not a good idea. So the one that I just started putting out is like an apocalyptic one.
oh,
And
I love that. Love
oh,
that.
it's so good.
Oh,
So
I love that. Okay. I would really like to read that. Can you like please send that to me when you
yeah.
finish it?
But like
So,
the because like I originally wanted to do a novella with it, but then I was like, this is gonna be way too short for
mhm,
it to be because it's not gonna, it's not gonna be a short story, but it's also not going to be like full length. So I was like, I might as well just do like episodes on Kindle Vella and just see how it
mhm,
goes. And I even thought about doing my own short story anthology thing monthly that I put out through Kindle Vella because you can do that like once a month or once a week.
mhm.
And I was like, oh, I can just do a whole bunch of stuff. And then
Yeah,
because
it's a
apparently,
cool idea.
yeah, apparently Kindle Vella also like um what's the word I'm looking for? Helps you get more recognized, I guess is what I'm
It
looking for.
seems,
I don't know
based
the
on what
word.
my friend was saying, it was easier for her to get people to I don't want to say pay attention, but pay attention like
Mm-hmm.
to her Bella stories because the I guess people are paying in like tokens or something. They're not like paying
Yeah,
outright money for it.
yeah.
Um it was easier to get people to be like, okay, yeah, I'll click on that. I'll spend like a token or something when they have like 100 tokens to choose from. So, or I mean to spend. So she was saying that she found it was easier to gain traction with that. So I feel like that's definitely a cool option for people who
Mm-hmm.
do tend to write like more shorter form things. So and I do know that because I made a video about this once that based on what I at least was reading on like Kindle Vella's
Mm-hmm.
like help page and everything, that you can publish that later like all together.
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
consolidate everything. So you know, if you're doing a short story anthology and you decide you're going to release it with Kindle Vella, like maybe monthly or something, like down the line, you could absolutely
Mhm.
go ahead and just turn that into a book and self-publish that one as an actual book. So I think that's a cool option, especially
Yeah.
since I have absolutely no doubt you'll be able to do it. So, like, meanwhile, there's me who has tons of self-doubt, and I'm like, no, this girl, she's fine. She's gonna be able to write it.
This
Like,
is no,
you are like a powerhouse when it comes to this stuff.
this is
So,
not helping my imposter syndrome. I'll tell you that.
oh my God, let's I all I have is imposter syndrome. It's like my entire life. So we can talk about that. We'll talk about that in the next one because I feel like
Yeah.
people can relate to that. So anyway,
Yeah.
thank you so much, SD, for being on here. I encourage everyone, please check out SD's work. She writes under SD Sampley, and you can find all three of her novels as part of the Moonlight Howls series. Any fantasy authors or fantasy readers are really going to be interested in this, especially because you know, they're set apart from the kind of the run-of-the-mill fantasy that you tend to see. So I think it would be something that you should definitely check out, and then go follow her on social media as well. Again, I'm talking about you like you're not here, but it's so rude. I was raised better than that. But
Okay.
I really was, I swear. I'm sorry, Mom. So it's yeah. Anyway, thank you so much, SD. This is really,
Thank
really
you.
fun. And like I'm good at being fake because I work in plastic surgery, but I'm telling you, I'm sincerely saying I had a lot of fun with this. And
Thank
I
you so
really,
much.
yeah, I would really like to have you back on after your next
Yeah.
novel is out and just see how things have been. So thank you
Yes.
again, and
Thank
have
you
a
so
good,
much for having me.
yeah, of course. So have a good one. Okay.
All right. Bye bye.
Okay, bye.